the only people on the planet who can take a word like bad and make it great. I mean, we could take horse crap and turn it into meatloaf. We have that ability to change stuff that would be considered waste into something that you would want to treasure. That's one of the gifts that we have. We've done that with language. We've done that with things people have thrown away. We have artists who've taken things that have been thrown away and turned them into fantastic art projects.
At 3 years old, you moved to New York with your aunt?
Yes. According to stories told to me by family members, when she first saw me and I first saw her, it was love at first sight. I think she's like 15 years older than my mother. Because I was born out of wedlock in Cincinnati, Ohio, especially at that time, was something frowned upon. My mother was a little bit distraught, and she stayed that way for a while. But her sister, she loved me unconditionally from the moment we saw each other. So whenever she would come to the house, it was always joy, it was always happiness, it was always an upbeat kind of a feeling. And then when I saw, according to my Aunt Vivian, she says, when I saw her downstairs in front of our building with some suitcases by her, and according to what was getting ready to happen, she was coming to New York City with her new husband. And she had married this guy named Joseph Davis. And they said that I ran upstairs and put on my cowboy boots, my hat, my vest, and I got my belt with my guns. And I came downstairs and I told everybody I was going to New York with Aunt Beanie. And my Aunt Vivian said that I looked so serious that no one thought it was a joke. They thought that I was very serious. I was 3 years old, so I had no idea. But I do know that we did come to New York and my life began. I call my real mother Mommy, and I call my aunt who raised me Mother, because she did the mothering. She gave me enough love to last a lifetime. And her husband, Joseph Davis, he gave me a work ethic that still stays with me today. So I got a balanced diet as a child. And it started at that moment, I suppose, when I wanted to come to New York at 3 years old.
Wow.
Leaving Cincinnati, Ohio, yes.
Wow. So they parented you all through your childhood?
Basically, yes. I lived with them until I was about 11 years old. But Daddy Joe was a workaholic. And I worked all the time. I mean, I was raised in Jamaica, Queens. And I don't know how many other kids had to go through what I went through, but I had to feed chickens and rabbits before I went to school. Daddy Joe had brought Savannah, Georgia to Queens, New York. So I was raised like I was on a farm in Georgia someplace. There was a piece of land across the street from my house. He turned it into a mini farm. There isn't anything I can't grow. Collard greens, corn, tomatoes, peppers. I knew all that stuff because I had to do it when I was a kid. We had another piece of land right next to the house. We would build stuff. We made a barbecue pit. We built a recreation house. I know how to do stuff with my hands. I know how to build stuff. I know how to grow stuff. I know how to do a lot of things because of my father. But I did not appreciate it. I hated it because I had to work all the time. I wanted to play. The game in Queens was handball. I was very good, but I didn't have a chance to play like I wanted to because I always had work to do. I had chores every single day. There wasn't a day other than maybe Sunday that I didn't have anything to do. They both gave me, as I said, a balanced diet when it came to being raised. My mother taught me how to write before I ever went to school. I knew my alphabet before I went to school. So she was really my first teacher. And Daddy Joe made it clear that if you're lazy, you're not worth anything. You've got to get up in the morning. We had a rule that said, I got to be up at 5:30. Everybody in this house better be up at 5:30. So all my life, I get up at 5. I still wake up at 5:30. I don't always get up out the bed, but I do wake up because it's in me. My father kind of instilled it in me. I had a friend of mine that wanted to spend 2 weeks in the summer with me in my house. He lived in the projects, and he was a great guy. Matter of fact, his name was John Ritter. He happened to become an accountant. He became, as a matter of fact, Stevie Wonder's accountant. John Ritter was a good friend of mine. We were very close. We went to school together, and he wanted to spend 2 weeks in the summer. And so my mother agreed. His mother agreed. She came over, and my father woke us up at about 5 o'clock, 5:30 rather. And Johnny said, "What? We got to get up early." I said, "Yeah, man, if you're here." My father said, "We're going to make some money today." So Johnny liked that, hearing the idea we're going to make money. So he got dressed real quick. We got into the pickup truck, and Daddy Joe took us out to a potato farm way out in Long Island. And you had to, in order to make some money, we had to pick potatoes. And you got like $1 for every 5-pound bag of potatoes you picked. So if you didn't pick potatoes fast enough, you end up walking away with nothing, not that much money. I knew I had to work hard and fast because Daddy Joe would get on my case if I didn't. So we were working and trying to pick potatoes, make this little bit of money. And Johnny had never worked that hard. On our way back to the house, Johnny fell asleep in the pickup truck. I never figured he was out like a light. So when we got home, I don't know how much money Johnny made, but all I know is when we got back to my house, Lydia, Johnny started packing. And I said, why you? I said, what you doing? He said, I got to go, man. He says, your father's crazy. You'll get up too early and you work in the fields. I can't do that. I can't do that. So he spent actually one night with me, and that was it.
Oh my goodness. So one of the stories I heard, which I love, is that even though your father made you work very hard and made you work with your hands, you hated to have your hands dirty and your fingernails dirty.
You know what? I don't know where you got that information from. That's like really pulling the covers off, baby. God, I'm stark raving naked in the middle of the forest. Yes. Oh my God. And I was just, Masani, the sister who was helping us get this thing done, she just questioned me about how come I was looking at my fingernails last week when we were in New Haven, Connecticut. Lydia, I don't know. It's everybody's got an idiosyncrasy. I guess that's just my idiot. I have a hard time dealing with my hands being dirty. I don't like my hands to be dirty. I can't stand dirt under my fingernails. And when Daddy Joe had me working, another one of the things I like to do was take cars apart. There's no way in the world you can take a car apart, mess with the motor, and not get that nasty, grimy stuff under your fingernails. So here I am taking the generator out of the car because inside of the generator, there's a lot of copper. And if I can open up the generator and get the copper out, that'll be my spending money. You take the copper to the junkyard, you get $30 or whatever. But to get the copper out of the thing took work, and my hands would be dirty. And so I would find something and start picking the dirt from between my fingernails, and JJ would come and smack my hands and say, boy, your hands are made to work. What are you worried about your hands for? He thought that was a very weak move on my part to be concerned about my hands. My mother thought my hands were beautiful, and she would always tell me to keep them clean and all that stuff. I even had a sister one time tell me on the train, when we were talking, and I was trying to run a big-time rap. She says, Abiodun, I can look at your hands and tell you're as sweet as you can be. And I said, wow. She says, you have beautiful hands. So I don't know. I've always had a thing about my hands. And I know that magic is in our hands, but I just had this thing about my hands. I just can't stand my hands being dirty or grimy. And I hate to have the dirt in my... It's just, I don't know what it is. It's just an idiosyncrasy, one of the little problems that I have.
Your father taught you about money. He taught you to work hard, but he also taught you about money. What were a couple of the things that he taught you regarding money and saving and earning? Not only has stayed with you, but you've passed on to your sons.
First of all, he felt that you had to earn whatever you got in life. He had a saying, if you're not willing to work, you're not worth the ground you're standing on, which is kind of like a big insult. I understood that. He felt that any way that we could make a living, an honest living, it didn't matter what it was, you should do that. But he also felt like if you are going to do something, there's another one of his sayings, if a job is worth doing, it's worth doing right. That was another one of his major statements. So I grew up with those things in my mind. And when it came to saving money and using money wisely, I mean, he always talked about how people that made a lot of money would destroy a lot of it away because they didn't have any sense. They would let the money drive them crazy. Daddy Joe always mentioned that money was a tool. Money is nothing that you worship. It's something that you would use to get to make your life comfortable, to take care of the things that you needed to take care of so that you could feel like you were being responsible for yourself. So I got a bunch of lessons, and they weren't lessons that you would read in a book, because Daddy Joe wasn't a book guy. He was a practical doer. He was somebody that actually would provide a living example for you to follow. And he was crude. He wasn't soft. He wasn't warm and cuddly. We never had a cuddly moment. I think the softest moment I ever had with my father was like around Easter when there was vacation. I did get a couple of days off from work, and he said, why don't you go fishing or something like that? Now, see, I know a lot of stories. My father took me fishing. My father never took me fishing, but Daddy Joe told me to go fishing. And so I told him, I said, I had to get a fishing rod. He said, boy, you can make a rod. That's easy. I didn't go to the store and buy no fishing rod. He got a long stick and he showed me how to make a rod. And then he said, and dig up some worms and you got to put it on the end of the hook. And the idea of digging up the worms and putting them on the hook was just repulsive. I couldn't imagine it. And worms are just, ugh, they're just yucky. And I get the worms under my skin and my nails. Oh my God. So he stood right there and I dug the hole and I saw some worms. I saw the worms. And he said, pick up the worm, boy. So I picked up the worm. And he said, now put it on the hook. And the worm was squirming. He was like, he knew he was going to die or something. And I had a hard time dealing with the worm. I'm going to be honest. I dropped the worm. I let the worm go. There's pick up the worm. Pick that worm up, boy. And he went off on me. So I picked the worm back up. And then he took it from me and he put it on the hook. And then he threw the hook aside. He said, now you do the same thing. He did it so quickly and without any remorse for the worm or nothing. And so I got the next hook and I did the same thing. All right. And I did it. And then I had to do it again just to let him know I knew how to do it. So I did it twice. I came in the house and my mother asked me what we'd be doing in the yard. And I said, putting worms on a hook. And she said, oh, really? I said, ugh. She said, you didn't like that? I said, nope. And so, see, mother would encourage, she was my support. I mean, I could talk to her. We had fun together. It was a whole nother world. So when it came time, around Easter time come up, he said, boy, he says, now you know how to fish. He said, why don't you go to Baisley Park? Baisley Park, they had a lake in Baisley Park that I would go fishing in. I think they used to stock it with catfish. I can't stand catfish. I hate them. But I actually took my little skills and made my little hook, homemade fishing rod, and I throw it in the water. I caught more catfish, and I put them in a bucket, and I bring the bucket home, and Daddy Joe thought it was wonderful. So look what that boy did. He and my mother both like catfish. I could not eat catfish. First of all, they're the ugliest fish on the planet. Second of all, they're very greasy. I don't know how anybody can eat catfish. And in my travels, I find that black folks like catfish for some reason. I mean, maybe that's one of the minus black points I get. I do not like catfish. I do not eat catfish. But I caught a bunch of catfish out of the Baisley Pond in Queens. And my folks ate it. I learned that the whole idea of doing for self was a lesson that Daddy Joe constantly taught. And saving, having a big freezer. We always had to have a freezer full of food. If a store went on strike, my family was not going to suffer. We were going to eat regardless. We had a peach tree. My mother made peach preserve. We had grapevine. We had grape preserve. We made the greatest wine in Queens, Concord wine. The policemen would come by to get their wine. The firemen would get their wine. The mailman would get their wine. The insurance, everybody would go by the Davises and get a gallon of wine because they knew we would have the greatest wine. I picked the grapes. I mean, so there was a lot of stuff that I learned how to be economical, how to do for self, how to be self-sufficient. Daddy Joe believed in that. And I have to admit, even though I did not appreciate him when I was younger, if it were not for him, I don't know what I would be today. I mean, I know a lot of what I do are based on the lessons that he taught me.
What I gleaned from your parents was that they really gave you a balance. What it is to be a man, of what it is to love a woman, to honor a woman, to take care of a woman, and to be authentically you.
I got that. I mean, for real. I mean, I got an excellent lesson. Yes, it was very, very balanced because they had a relationship that worked together. You know, romance is nice. Romance is fun. It's like the custard on top of the pie. But the real pie is not romance, it's work. So when people have relationships, it's like, what can you contribute to this? What can we do that makes this relationship work for both of us, where I'm growing and you're growing, we're developing? And the thing about Daddy Joe and Mother, their relationship was based on what they could bring to the table for each other. I mean, first of all, I think they hooked up with each other when they were in their 40s. So they were good and grown. They weren't like kids. And it was like, he had a farm, he had some cows and meat, and my mother was working in the store that my grandfather had, and they saw how they could make a contribution to each other's business that would be beneficial. And so consequently, their relationship was based on what they could do together to accomplish something, as opposed to sitting around holding hands and kissing under the moonlight. That's a nice story, but that's not real life. Real life is doing something that's going to help build something that will be sustaining and measurable by your work involved and what each one of you have done to make the work, because it's not a lopsided thing. The idea that the woman stays home and takes care of the house and the man goes out, no. We have that, but in the Black family, the woman works, the man works, they work in the house and out the house. There are no particular lines. It's like whoever can get the job done. The main thing is that we want to live in a comfortable situation, and everybody's got to play a part. No one sits on the sideline to watch somebody else and then come and wipe the sweat off their face after they finish. No, we're going to sweat together. And that's something that I appreciate. I couldn't have anyone in my life who was just a sister that was beautiful, nice to look at, but she ain't do nothing. That's crazy. That would make me very, very unhappy. It would never last.
Well, I think that's why you and Judy lasted so long.
Oh, come on. Judy was special. She was super. She was born the same day as mother. When I first met Judy and she told me her birthday was August 12th, I said, that's insane. Mother was in the hospital, but she was a diabetic and she was having difficulties. And, Judy was married and I was married. We both were married. We shouldn't be messing around, but we saw each other and that it factor happened, the thing clicked. And when she told me she was August 12th, there was only one thing in my mind that I wanted to do, and that was take Judy to see my mother. And I did. And she was laying there in the hospital, and I went and I had to talk to the doctor. And I came back, and she was braiding mother's hair, and I could not believe it. So when Judy left to go to the bathroom, my mother said to me, she says, now I know she's not your wife, but I like her very much. Judy, she was everything to me. If you're fortunate enough to have an angel come into your life on that level, in at least one lifetime, then you could truly say you've lived. She was that angel for me. I mean, I've been very fortunate. I've had people around me even now who have blessed me over time. But the commitment that Judy made to us, to me, and just to help me enjoy it. I mean, there is not one Caribbean island that I haven't been to because of Judy. She would plan my birthday trips. Who gets a birthday, don't know where they're going until they get to the airport? I mean, and she would hook it up lovely. We've been everywhere. You name the island, I may have been there twice.
You guys complimented each other in a lot of ways. You were a good travel companion.
Right.
She didn't get into your business. You didn't get into hers. And you allowed each other to be. And I think that is because you were raised in a certain way that encouraged that.
Yeah, absolutely right. She did provide me with the one thing that I truly appreciate, and that was space. Sometimes people think that love is being just always huddled up together. Space is important. We got to have our space. And if there's love, it's there, it's going to be there, whether or not we're a distance apart or we're right together. Because you could be together and be far apart. And that's no fun. I mean, that's horrible. It's best to give that person that you care about space if that's what's required for them to do what they have to do. Judy did that naturally. I mean, for all the years we were together, not one time did we ever talk about we should move in together. We never mentioned that. I mean, and of course, everybody knows it's cheaper to pay rent one place than two places, but we never had that discussion. She liked where she stayed, and I liked where I stayed, and we liked the idea of visiting each other whenever we wanted to. And that was beautiful. And it kept everything down. It kept whatever, we still had our other lives to live. And I appreciated that very much. It was probably the most, that was the most devastating moment in my life when I couldn't wake her up that Sunday when she checked out. Just the idea that she came here and checked out. I mean, it haunted me for a moment. It doesn't now like it did.
But do you realize that was a gift?
Oh, yeah, I got it now. I know that's how she wanted it to go. I mean, and then I've had a couple of her girlfriends say that it was a blessing for her to come and be with the person that she loved, to leave on that in my arms, So I got that, but trust me, my human sensitivities were totally messed up for a moment. It was just, it was a strange feeling, but I've come to grips with it. Besides the fact that I'm in communication with her, whenever I'm doing something that I know I think is right, I can see her face smiling. If I'm doing something that I wonder if it's good or bad, I can see that little frown on her face. Her looks weren't something you would guess at.
Yes, she was
Yeah,
very
her look,
transparent.
she's guiding me even now. And I'm grateful, very, very grateful, because a lot of folks don't want to deal with the spiritual world. But the older we get, the more in touch with the spirits we have to get. And she's one of my major spiritual envoys. I mean, I've learned a great deal from her even today, because she gave me some great lessons. I mean, the greatest lesson that she gave me, which I try to live up to, you got to feel good about yourself. And she would say, if you don't feel good about yourself, all bets are off. It starts with feeling good about you.
She was my godmother, and she was your lady for how many years?
39 years. And she was also a major wisdom advisor for me. I mean, she gave me a lot of wisdom. Judy and her sister Stephanie were two of the smartest women I've ever met. They were brilliant. Stephanie was just super special as well. But Judy was a perfect big sister for Stephanie. And they really worked together very well. That's one reason when I was a kid, I always wanted to deal with older women because, see, women have wisdom. You all can't run around punching people in the mouth to get your point across. You got to use some wits about you. And down south, they call it mother wit, whatever. But if you really are dealing with a woman who is really pleased with being a woman, she's automatically got wisdom to share with the world, because you'll have to use your wisdom to survive. And you can't strong arm nobody. You've got to be wise. You've got to find other ways to get your point across, to be persuasive and so forth. Judy had all those attributes. I mean, she was a special, special woman because she had sensitivity, she had charm, she had beauty, she had grace. The only thing that Judy didn't have that people thought she did have, that she could be bold in front of the camera. She was shy about that. She couldn't handle being viewed as some kind of a beauty queen, or being like they wanted to make her the poster baby for a recruitment training program, and they put the cameras on her and she froze up. That was Judy's thing, wasn't being in front of the camera. Some people might look the part, they can't play that part. Judy looked the part like she could be that person, but that was not who she was. She liked to really work behind the scenes.
What?
She enjoyed that more than anything else.
You came from a great home environment, and so did Judy and Stephanie. They had their parents, their nucleus was intact. Their perspective, your perspective, is really more of a healthy perspective. You know, even though you were born out of wedlock, you were raised with two parents. You were raised with love and discipline and responsibility, and she had the same thing. So it just is interesting now that I'm way older to be able to hear this and be able to connect the two, to go, oh, I get it, because Judy and Stephanie were my anchors. And Stephanie was my original godmother. And when
Right.
Stephanie left to go abroad to Brazil, she turned me over to Judy and was like, okay, if you need anything, Judy's got you. And that's how my relationship with Judy started, because I knew Stephanie since I was about 8 years old. I met Judy when I was about 18. I was getting ready to leave BLS and come to Los Angeles, and Judy became my anchor at that point.
Her and Stephanie were two of my super angels. I know that as well. And they would love to sit and plan trips. And Judy could read a map. Oh boy, could she read a map. The first time I ever went to Africa was, we went to Spain, went to Madrid, and we went to this car, and Judy had already plotted how many hours I could drive in a day. She said you could average 300 miles a day. And then she had hooked up so that I would drive about 300 miles, and there would always be a motel or hotel that she had already hooked up for us, waiting for us. I mean, the organization, I'm telling you, you're traveling like that, being organized makes all the difference in the world.
Well, and that was before the internet. She was doing all of that before the internet.
That's very true. And we got down, so she had figured that we could go down to the southern part of Spain, which is Malaga, and hang out, and then take the car and drive down to Algeciras and go across the Mediterranean, going right past the Rock of Gibraltar. I mean, I never dreamed of it. And besides, I always thought the rock of Gibraltar was just that, a big rock in the middle of the sea, and it is. But there are people that live on the rock of Gibraltar, and I didn't realize that. It's a whole big housing development on the rock, but it is a rock, and it's in the middle of the Mediterranean. And there's a ferry boat that goes right by it, so we put the car in the ferry boat, went past the rock of Gibraltar, and you land in Tangiers, Morocco. Oh, and we got to North Africa. It was deep because, I mean, I was so impressed. It's the first time I've ever been to Africa, any parts of Africa. So I'm there in Africa. We got this car that we rented in Madrid, and Judy and I have made this great trip from one continent to the next. Oh, this is heaven. And this guy, just to show you the value, I'm trying to tell brothers, if you got a woman in your life, please cherish her, because see, all of you women, you'll see different than brothers. Sometimes brothers might jump the gun a little bit, and a sister can pull you back in place. Here we get to Tangiers. A brother walks up to my side of the car. I just drove the car off the ferry, and Judy's in the car, I'm in the car. The brother walks up when we get onto the land. He says, "What's happening, brother?" I swear to God, I thought I was in the Bronx. He was, and he looked Puerto Rican. He looked cool. He's a nice looking guy, nice smile. And he said the right thing. "What's happening, brother?" I said, "Whoa, where am I?" I mean, I forgot I was in Tangiers. I thought I was on Nelson Avenue or something in the Bronx. Man, I said, "Everything's cool." He says, "You got to get your paperwork done. I'll take care of it." And I remember Judy saying, "I'm not giving you our passports." And so I'm saying, why is Judy being so hard? He didn't ask for a passport. He said, "I don't need your passports." He says, "But there's paperwork that you have to do, and it's a line inside, and I can make it easy for you. I'll take care of it myself. You just got to give me certain things." So whatever he needed, he got, but he did not get the passports. Okay. He goes inside, and I'm looking at Judy. Why is she being so hard? You know, the guy seemed like an angel to me. You know, "What's happening, brother?" He looks cool. Now he's going to do service for us. We ain't got to get on the line. We ain't got to go in the office. He comes back, got our papers. We had to get our signature. We signed the papers. He takes them back. "We're good to go. We're in Africa. We're ready. We're cool." And then he says, "Now, I know you're just got here, but do you have a place already lined up to stay?" And we said, "No." He said, "I know a nice hotel." So I look at Judy and said, "See, he even has a nice hotel for us to stay in. Whoa, this is great." And she still got a look on her face like she ain't sure about this. So we get to this hotel in town, in Tangiers, and it seemed like it was okay. It wasn't a 5-star hotel like Judy likes, but it was all right. I parked the car in the garage underneath the hotel, and I was walking up the steps, thinking Judy was behind me. I get to the desk, and the guy says, "Good evening. Are you by yourself?" I said, and I turned and I realized Judy's not there beside me. And I said, "No." I said, "I have a friend." "Oh, she's probably at the bottom of the stairs. This is the first time in Africa. She's a little nervous." So I go to the bottom. I go to the staircase, and Judy's at the bottom of the stairs. Says, "You can stay here. I'm not." I'm like, this is crazy. What's the problem? What's she going through this for? So I go down the stairs to try to coax her to come upstairs. We're gonna be cool. We can chill in the room or whatever. I'm downstairs and I look over to where I parked the car, and there's some guys hovering around the car. So I yelled, "Yo, yo!" And they ran. And then Judy gave me that look that only a sister can give a brother.
I told you so.
And I felt so stupid. I said, these guys are going to rip us off. I mean, you could just see them looking in the back of the car, and one guy had a crowbar with him or something like it. I said, oh my God. I ran over there, had done no damage to the car, but you could see where they had been messing, trying to open the door. I said, oh my goodness. So Judy never said a word. She just gave me that dumb look, that crazy look that no brother on the planet wants to see. But at that moment, I don't know what to do. I'm lost now. Because I thought that I'd been an angel, somebody was going to hook us up, and this guy was setting us up. So we're riding around Tangiers. It's almost sunset, Lydia. I mean, the sun is going down in a place that we've never been in our lives. We ain't got no place to stay. We got a car from Madrid. That's all we got. A kid on a motorbike with another kid on the bike with him rides up alongside of me and says, "Amigo, you want to get high?" I don't want to do nothing unless Judy says it's okay. Because She's in charge. So I looked at Judy, and Judy says, yeah. And when she said, yeah, he said, follow me. So I'm following instructions. Now I'm being a good person. I'm going to do everything right according to somebody else's ideas because I messed up. I follow this kid. He takes us up to this high hill. I mean, it was a steep hill. And we get out, we sit around, and he's got this hash, and he even had some marijuana, and I don't like hash with the tobacco like they like to smoke it over there. So I had mine with marijuana, and we'd sit up there getting high and talking. Then the kid says, listen, amigo, you know you're from America, I can tell. And you have no place to stay. You can stay with me. My family is very rich. We have a lot of space. And I'm saying, rich? What are you talking about? And so, and Judy's smiling. She's like, everything is just, she doesn't feel anything weird. This was a kid. This kid was 18 years old. He was a kid, a real bona fide child. Anyway, we're getting in the car. Now I can't even drive the car because I'm so high. I think that the daggone car is going to it's going to keel over. Something's going to happen because the hill is too steep. I can't drive down that hill. He realizes my fears and he says, amigo, I'll drive. So he drives the car down the hill and takes us to his villa. His family lived on the second highest hill in Tangiers. The governor lived on the first highest hill, and they had a villa. They had 2 Mercedes in the garage, but they couldn't go nowhere. They had no gas. What I found out what happened is his father was a member of parliament. He had been an equestrian champion of Morocco for 10 years. So he was a very famous person. And they had all this land and all this money. His father had $55 million in the bank. But everything was frozen because somebody in parliament batted on his father and said his father was the biggest hash dealer in the world, which he was. He was exporting hash like Standard exports oil. Everything was frozen. But the help never left. The help stayed. At 2 o'clock in the morning, when we got to his villa, Hamido was the name of the guy that was the helper. He got up, he made us some mint tea. When they give you mint tea in Tangiers, you get not only the tea, but you get the leaf in it. So you know it's the real deal. And he gave us some wheat bread that tastes like 9 or 10 grain bread with some jam. I mean, we had a little snack. Then we had our own room to sleep in. It was gorgeous. I mean, the whole thing was just like a fairy tale. In the morning, he comes and says he wants to wash our clothes. Judy would let him wash her stuff. She said she could wash her own stuff. I let him wash my stuff. I didn't have a problem. He said he wanted to wash the clothes. Okay, fine. Sounds good to me. I went to the shower. I'm taking a shower outside, overlooking all the Tangiers, naked as a jaybird. You can't see me, but I can see everything. And right next to where I'm taking a shower is these big old black grapes. I'm eating grapes. I mean, this was heavenly. But there was a problem because Pops was in jail and Jamel and Team wanted to run the hash business and he had no transportation. So by him hooking up with us, they used the rental car that we had gotten. He was using it to transport hash from place to place in Morocco. So we were an angel for him as well. In the meantime, Margarita, Jamel and Team's mama, Judy and her got along famously. Because Judy could speak a little Spanish, could speak a little French, they could communicate. And she played bingo with the people because Margarita played bingo and Judy was hanging out with her. But they have a rule in Tangiers, I don't know if it's all over the Arab nation, but the men walk in front of the women. They don't walk together. The men and women do not walk side by side. So Judy was asking Margarita, she says, does that bother you that the men have you walking behind them? And Margarita told Judy, we don't mind because the men spit when they talk.
I want to shift now to start talking about your art. I want to know about you collaborating with your sons because you've been using them with your work for a while now.
It's basically Pharaoh, my oldest son. Pharaoh sings, and Pharaoh is like Quincy Jones. He can arrange stuff beautifully. He knows how stuff should sound. He had a singing group for a moment called Asante. They had a spot on Soul Train. And they did it with the Fugees, a piece called Look What You've Done. And so they had a moment, but they were signed with Sony. That whole department went out, and when the department went out, they went out with the department. Like they threw the babies out with the bathwater, so to speak. And I felt really bad, and I kind of felt I might have been responsible because I'm pretty sure they knew that Pharaoh was my son. The group was better than Boys to Men and all these other groups. I mean, these boys were great. They were good looking. They could really sing. Pharaoh and my son writes as well. The music was great. I have a grandson that's on that track now. He's a musical guy and he's great. He's got the package. And I think Kari's going to be somebody that folks going to have to deal with because he's really got that it factor and he writes some great stuff. So I'm looking forward to him at least keeping that name alive, the legacy alive in that regard. Pharaoh and I, what happened is that Oba, my son who was a lawyer, Oba's mother, Aisha, she had a relationship before we met. And so she had a son. Her son became my son, of course, because I was married to his mother. And then he had a son, so his son becomes my grandson. Oba, my son that I had with Aisha, he was telling me, he said, we got to go see Arando because he's got these tracks. And I was telling Oba for like over a year, I said, I'm not down with tracks. I like a real bass. I want a real piano player. I don't want to hear no computer music. That ain't no music. That's nonsense. Then one day Oba said, Pops, he's your grandson. You got to at least see him. He's living in New York now. That's cold-blooded. You're not even going to go see him. So I said, oh, boy. So then I felt real bad. So I go over to his house. I meet him for the first time, and he has a beautiful wife. I don't even know what her name is. I call her Smiley. She's got the sweetest smile. It just makes you want to melt. And then they got a child. His name is Elijah. He's a monster. He's a beast. And they are so peaceful. And you say, how do two people so peaceful have a child so wild? Because he's a crazy little kid. But he's a beautiful kid, but he just got a lot of energy. And I heard his tracks. And the tracks really touched me. I mean, I never thought I could appreciate tracks. But this kid has some skills that were off the chain. And I should have thought about it because his father, Ricky, his computer skills are so ridiculous. At 18 years old, he was given a spot directing a department at IBM at Research Triangle. And he got him and applied him and actually filled out some papers for him to be a student at the University of North Carolina because the director of that department said, it would be nice if we had a piece of paper. So we got a piece of paper, but he didn't need no paper because him and computers seem to be destined to be together. I mean, he's got skills. And then his son parlays all those skills that he got from birth into music and produces these monster tracks. So every time we go to the house, he would have another track. And Oba would look at my red folder. I had a red folder with my most recent poetry in there. And he'd say, Pops, you need to do this to that. And he would pick that out. He'd pick it out. I would recite it over the track. Then they'd send it down to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh would dress it up. He'd put the lacing and the embroidery, whatever it needed, background vocals, whatever. That was a gift.
Now, did you work with Pharaoh on 25 Years?
Yes, I did.
That's a wonderful album.
Yep, he's involved with that. Sun's Rising is one of the pieces on there that was very special, yes. Every chance I get, because Pharaoh has a musical gift. And I had to use him because he's there, he's available. Beyond being my kid, he's just a great human being. He's got a lot of good parts as far as his humanness is concerned. It's like Pharaoh's the kind of person that if you have an issue with him, you better check yourself because it ain't him that you got the issue with. It's you, and you're just projecting. No, he's a good guy, and he keeps me in check. You know, he keeps me on a level playing field. He's a Libra, and he keeps the scales balanced. He's a real, true Libra. He's not like lopsided. He's unbiased, like a real Libras are. He's a friend to the friendless. I mean, Pharaoh will make friends with somebody who you wouldn't even want to be around. They might smell like shit and piss, but Pharaoh will be talking to him and say, underneath all that, there's something there worth saving. And he'll find that thing that needs to be saved. That a lot of people don't even go that route. He'll go that route in a heartbeat. He told me like this homeless guy that he was talking to, he said his name was George. He said before he would take any test in his African Studies class, he would talk to George. He said George knew as much about African history as Professor Jeffries. He said he had the information. But George had checked out of society. He was living on the street. He wasn't playing the game, wasn't paying rent or nothing else. But he had a wealth of knowledge. And we got quite a few people, I call them outpatients, who are out there, who got knowledge, but they're just not going to participate in these societal games. And I understand that. But I couldn't live like that, but they can for some reason. My son Pharaoh would always find the good, and no matter who he saw, he never looked at a person face value and said they're no good. We should throw them away. And that's a quality that I don't have that like he has it way beyond me, because I'll size somebody up and it could be wrong. He goes into it a little deeper. He's been a musical partner of mine for some time. If I write something new, he'll be one of the first people that's going to hear it because I want feedback from him because he makes sense when he gives me feedback and he'll let me know if something is hot or cold. It's a joy. And when my son Obad is the same way, he's real smart. He's more anal than thorough. He's a lawyer, but he's definitely somebody I can count on. My kids have been truly a blessing because we're close as can be. And even though they get on my nerves sometimes because they want to run my life, my mother laughs. She thinks it's funny because they just love you, that's all. I say, yeah, but too much love can be suffocating. But I do appreciate the love because I would not want my kids and I to be estranged. We're nowhere near that. When Judy passed away, my kids came to me and they said, well, Pops, what are you going to do for your birthday? I said, well, I'm not a travel agent. I said, my travel agent is gone. I said, obviously, I'm going to be home. Evan said to me, no, Pops, you're not going to be home. We have never seen you home on your birthday. So I said, so where am I going to be? He said, you're going to be in Puerto Rico, and we're going to be with you.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and then after that, we ended up in Dominican Republic together. So they tried to keep Judy.
That's wonderful. Judy would love that.
Yeah, and I know Judy is smiling because they've taken up her role by preparing a trip. It's been a joy. I was asked in Stockholm once, they said, of all the things you've done, what is your greatest achievement? I have to think about that. I said, my kids. What could be better than that? When you got kids that are really functional and doing the right thing, all my kids are doing something that I'm proud of. I don't have no throwaways. I don't have no kids that I wish you get it together. All of my children are doing something that makes me proud.
That's beautiful. You have become a master at collaborating with the first Last Poets, and then when you broke off and started your Last Poets, as well as working with rappers who wanted to do your material. The process of collaboration, what does that mean to you?
It was never any first, second group. The groups just simply evolved. The very first group of the Last Poets was David Nelson, and I'm saying David because he's now a Black Hebrew, but his original name when we first got together was David Nelson. Gylan Kane, who happens to be the father of Khalil Kane, who is a known actor out there in Hollywood, and then myself. That's the original members of the Last Poets. That group evolved. When you evolve, you move to higher heights, you move to a different level. As far as I was concerned, it wasn't a downward move, it was always an upward move. Felipe was hanging out at the East Wind. Felipe was willing to let Kane be his daddy figure. Kane and I had a lot of conflict because I had a father. Daddy Joe was a father overtime. No way in the world Kane could cover that space. So he wanted me to be a son and act like I was beholden to him. It was never going to happen. We had nothing but problems. Felipe was abiding, and he was always there. David was also going to school here at Columbia University, and he actually was taking a psychology class, and they had a field trip on a very important weekend where we had a major show. The show consisted of Leroy Jones, Spirit House Movers and Players. Leroy Jones, for those of you that don't know, is actually Amiri Baraka, but then he was using his American name, Leroy Jones. He had a place in Newark. It was a cultural center, and he had actors, he had singers, dancers, he had a whole thing going on, all in the name of African American culture. And he had a whole program, Leroy Jones and the Spirit House Movers and Players. That was his theater company. He was going to perform one of his plays, which was called Black Mass. The play talks about the origination of the white man, how he was created in the laboratory. All right. And then also on that same bill was Sun Ra's orchestra. Sun Ra was crazy. He was truly one of the true superstars of that whole period of avant-garde jazz. Sun Ra had a bunch of conga players, a bunch of saxophone players. I mean, they would be space traveling on stage. And Sun Ra would have a sundial in front of the space. He'd put on some royal robe, and he would have lines like, "This is not my idea of things as they are. This is somebody else's idea of this world." And he'd have songs that dealt directly with the misfit behavior that this world is going through. and he would jump on it. And he had a spiritual kind of a ambiance that was extremely special. We had sold tickets out 2 weeks before the gig. David Nelson said to us we couldn't be there Friday and Saturday because he was going to be on a field trip with his psychology class on those 2 days. Garland Kane said, I'm going to tell you like the Jew. If you can't come to work on Monday, don't come Tuesday. And I remember when Kane said that, I said, oh, that's cold. Felipe was in the wings. Felipe had not written a poem, but he knew all of our background. He knew everything. He knew what we did because he had seen I don't know how many shows. So he was willing to step in to be that third person. And of course, Kane loved it because he knew Felipe was in support of him. And Kane had this big piece called Ungawa, which was like a fake kind of a God spirit. But you get all wrapped up in Ungawa. Ungawa became like Jesus and Allah and everybody. And you act like you almost like in a Pentecostal church. Felipe could sing, and I sang, so we could harmonize together. Kane loved it because we were the best choir he'd ever have behind him. And we'd be saying, Ungawa, Ungawa, ooh, my, Ungawa. I always say Kane was a cross between Jesus Christ and James Brown. He didn't want to walk on the water. He wanted to slide across the water. He thought he was like that. You could see his arrogance, and he had me and Felipe supporting him, all kind of air under his wings. Oh, it was special. And we had a good time. That was a very strong group, I must admit. So now David's out and Felipe's in. As time went on, and you got to understand, back then in the 60s, a month was like a year, and a week was like a month. I mean, we were working so rapidly and so fast. We were pushing the envelope. We knew that white folks were on their heels. They were totally intimidated by our afros and the African clothing and this African name change. And I mean, a lot of white folks got totally just messed up when we went full express into Africa. They really thought that these black folks have gotten away. They did not drink the Kool-Aid. Oh my God. I mean, it was scary, but we got crazy. We didn't follow our tracks well enough to maintain. But we did have some things that were happening back then that was so special. Felipe even says that I said to him, I don't know how true that is, but he says that I said that his people need to be organized and that he should do something about it. Well, he did. He went and he started the Young Lords over in El Barrio in Spanish Harlem. And that's a very valuable group, and it was very important. But it meant that he was going to lead the poets. Kane and I had to continue to have conflict. Matter of fact, there was a couple of times when we wanted to have a fight in between shows, and Felipe said, man, what does that look like? You guys fighting, and we got a show to do. We got to go up on stage in a few more minutes because halftime is over. Come on, man, you can't. But me and Kane had issues. He wanted to be in charge. He wanted to control me. He couldn't control me. Anyway, he was never really a true black nationalist like I was. I embraced black nationalism. Kane is a supreme artist. He gave the Last Poets our aesthetic. If it were not for Garland Kane, the Last Poets would probably been writing garbage. He demanded poetry, and he knew what poetry was supposed to do. Poetry is a fine art. I don't care. Everything come out your mouth that you want to call a poem is not a poem. And Kane made it quite clear. And I took what he was saying seriously. And I grew. And the only problem with me was that I'm a good student. I learned quickly. And once I learned it and I apply it, it's a wrap. So I was learning and applying and doing stuff that really kind of intimidated Kane because I was outgrowing him. For example, some people would come to when we had a show, folks would request certain poems they heard before. And there was this guy in the audience, he said, I want to hear New York. Kane had a poem entitled New York. It was a great poem. I thought it was fabulous. He even mentioned something about the movements in New York move like Elmer's glue, which means they don't move very well. A very good line, wonderful line. It fits the moment and everything. So I'm thinking that the guy wanted to hear his poem. He wanted to hear my poem, New York, because he said, no, I'm going to hear the one where the guy said, New York, the Big Apple. Kane shrunk. He felt like, I know he wanted to like jump out the window or something. He could not believe all of a sudden I'm getting some play. And he felt really, I could see it on his face to make him happy. So we began to drift further and further apart because I was getting better in writing poetry. My skill factors were going up. I knew exactly how to capture the essence of poetry. I was beginning to understand what this poetic thing was all about. And it takes a minute You just can't jump into this world and think you got it all going on. You got to experience some fire and maybe even drown a couple of times before you realize that you can swim or you can't swim. So I learned a great deal. And I was learning so much, I think it kind of messed with Kane a bit. So he wanted to go down to the village. He wanted to get out of Harlem. He didn't find comfort in being in Harlem. I mean, even though it was his idea to even have a place in Harlem, he felt much more comfortable in the village. He wanted to do some acting. I think he played in the play where they had blacks and Julius Caesar. He did a few things that had nothing to do with the movement, as far as I was concerned. So when Kane left and when Felipe left, I was literally left as the last poet. We had a group of men who used to take care of our business at the East Wind. They called themselves the East Wind Associates. They stayed on and they said, Abiodun, it's your group now. Of course, I'm the last guy standing. I had a performance at the Alamac Hotel. The Alamac Hotel was a hotel on 71st and Broadway. It was used as a dormitory for Sikh students. Sikh students were blacks and Puerto Ricans mostly who could not matriculate. They had to get their remediation skills up to par before they could matriculate in college, in City College. And so they had a dormitory for these students, for those that didn't want to stay at home, and it was at the Alamac Hotel. I got Umar bin Hassan a place to stay there because he had followed when Felipe, Kane, and I went to Antioch College to perform. That performance blew Umar's mind. He was a security guard there, and he saw us perform, and it knocked him out the box. He was smitten right away when he saw us. So he wanted to become a member of the Last Poets. And we were not recruiting anybody, but he felt that he had to be with this group for some reason. And he told us the story of selling his sister's hi-fi set and getting some money to get on a bus to come to New York. And he did all that. And he came to New York, and he came to the East Wind, and he came upstairs, and when Kane saw him, he told me to get him out. He said, that's a spy, get this nigga out of here. I didn't think Umar was a spy. Now the group has broken up. I've gotten Umar a place to stay in the Alamac Hotel. I'm there. The group was scheduled to perform there, but the group has now dwindled down to just one person, me, Whitney Elijah. And it was weird because the students were all basically about my age, and they loved me. I loved them. We had a great relationship. They all showed up. I mean, the place that we had the performance was the same place where they ate. So there was the tables were there. People were sitting on tables. I mean, it was a packed situation. And they came. The love that the students showed me was tremendous. But this is not fair because they needed to see Felipe and they needed to see Kane. But Felipe was in Spanish Harlem. Kane was down in the village. I'm up here doing this Last Poet thing. Umar is there. He's been living there. He's not going to school, but I got him a place to lay his head because he needed a place to sleep. And I knew the sister in charge of housing, Gloria Doolin. So I told the people in the audience, I said, there's a brother who came from Akron, Ohio. He wants to be in the group. And since you see that I'm by myself, and I would like to have the Trinity revisited because there was always a Trinity. There's always three poets with a conga player. Now, so Elijah was still there, so he was there with me, but I wanted to see if Umar could measure up. So I told the audience, I mean, it was really a setup. I said, I've never heard his poetry, but I would like for him to do one of his poems, and then let you all decide whether or not he should be in the group or not. Well, Umar had two poems that he had written, and he talks about it. One poem was entitled Nigger Town, and the other poem was entitled Motherfucker. Of course, he did the Motherfucker poem. And the thing about it, the poem was absolutely garbage, but Umar has a way of saying stuff that makes it interesting. Nobody could say motherfucker like him. Nobody has the highs and lows in their voice the way he does. And I've discovered that Umar's voice is like a trumpet. His daddy played trumpet, and he hated his father because his father abused his mother. But he loved his father also because his father was a tremendous artist. He was like a lot of black men. He suffered. He was abused, and he abused himself on top of it. So he had this poem talking about Huey Newton and Elvis Cleaver and Martin Luther King. They were all different kind of motherfuckers. Like Martin Luther King was a loving motherfucker. And Malcolm was a bad motherfucker. You know, and the way he would do it, every time he said motherfucker, the way or the adjective before, the audience would give him a rise. They would love. They felt it. The poem was really horrible, but I did give him a hug because the students were clapping, and I said, "All right, you're gonna be in the Last Poets." but you're never doing that motherfucking.
Again. Oh my goodness.
He was happy to be in the group. And you know what? He'll, if you were to interview him, he'll tell you that he's the only one who was chosen by the people. And I always have to laugh at that because I set it up lovely and I made the ultimate decision. The bottom line is that his poetry got better because we worked on it. The person that I put into the group after him to make that trinity come alive again was Jalal. Now, Jalal, he passed away a couple of years ago from stage 4 cancer. He had cancer and he's gone. But he was a genius, I thought. He rhymed. And I always give him credit for being the greatest influence on hip hop because all of his poetry rhymed. Every single poem. He never wrote a poem that didn't rhyme. And his rhymes were natural. They came just like we're having a conversation now. He could rhyme just as quickly as we could talk. We actually spent, one night he told me, he said, dude, we got to do some research. And I said, what you mean? He said, we got to, what's killing black people? I said, the cops. He said, no, what else? I said, drugs. He said, we got to go to a shooting gallery, man, and do a poem about it. So we went to the shooting gallery. We went to a place where they actually shoot heroin in Brooklyn. It was in some abandoned basement apartment. And the guy that came, that when you walk into the basement, there's this guy that's kind of like, I guess, the manager, whatever. Jalal spoke to him, and we don't shoot no drugs, but we were allowed to be in there. All the drugs would come in there, and they see us over there, and they look at us, and the guy would nod his head, like to say we were cool. And these folks would be looking for a healthy vein someplace in their body to shoot the drug. I'd never seen nothing like it. And I saw some things that I will never forget. I mean, a brother pulls his penis out and shot the drug in his penis. I went up to the brother and I said, yo, man, what about your woman, man? What? He said, man, this is better than any woman. And I said, I saw just how vicious drugs can be. When you want to cast your life aside for a drug, for a high, I saw that. Sister would come in, this one sister, she shot it up in her neck. It looked like she was committing suicide. It was unbelievable. But we stayed there all night. In the morning when we left, we came up with a poem that's on our first album called Jones Coming Down. I don't get any credit on it, but the fact is, the poem was really a conversation between me and Jalal. He said, day breaks, got the shakes, and I said, joint dripping, mind something, body aches. I said something just to compliment what he was saying. Anyway, he wrote the poem down, and he does it on the first album, and it's a monster. And it's an actual description of what we went through that entire evening. So that became the third person.
So you guys evolved, and you know what? I just want to stop real quick because I love that word evolve. I think that is such an important word in an artist's vocabulary, that artists evolve. You were a great student and you just kind of left Guyland in the dust because you were absorbing everything and moving. And sometimes I think what happens in groups, and I've seen this for myself, is that you come in and the person who's the dog to beat does not continue to sharpen their tools. And then everybody around them starts to go up and exceed them. And instead of them sharpening and saying, wait a minute, I can't let you stay, they tend to want to bring the group down. If I can't be the top, nobody can be the top. And that becomes the battle. It's no longer about the art. It's now about the ego. And I wanted to ask you, what did you learn from that helped you to start to collaborate in a different way?
I realized that Kane did have a control factor that he wanted to employ, and he wanted me to be in support of what he was about. Felipe was there to be supportive. Matter of fact, Felipe was there to help. Kane even ventured out a one-man play that he had written. And I knew he was writing plays because he had a fondness for Barbara Antia, because we gave Barbara Antia her space to do National Black Theater. National Black Theater was working out of her house, but she wanted to have a space where she could actually do her National Black Theater workshop. And she came to us, and Kane was in charge of all the artist activity happening in the space. He rented her space at $75 a month. Lord knows, I don't know what you can get for $75 a month today. But $75 a month, she was able to do National Black Theater in our space. If you come to Harlem today, you'll see that National Black Theater has a building that's an $8 million building on the corner of Fifth Avenue, 125th Street. Kane had all kinds of ideas, and he did a play called The Epitaph to the Coagulated Trinity, and got Felipe to direct it. Asked Felipe if he ever directed the play, and Felipe said yes. And then Felipe told me later on he had never done that, but he lied to Kane, and he got the job. And it was a one-man play, and I guess Kane wanted to know, was I sound right? Was that good? Whatever. The case is that it worked out. I was disheartened when I'd seen a poem take place in Sylvia's, my poem on the first album called Two Little Boys, about two little junkie kids. It was a very pivotal point in my participation in the Last Poets. And I was always picking up poetry from the people, because that's where the poetry is anyway. The people have the poetry. They represent the poetry in everything they do. So Sylvia's was a spot. That was a soul food restaurant to go to in Harlem. If you're gonna eat some real good soul food, you gotta go to Sylvia's. So I was at Sylvia's. I'd been there many times before. And this particular occasion, I saw these two little boys come in, and they ordered some food. They had chicken and mac and cheese and collard greens, and they had the plates were just packed, and they ate like they had not eaten for a while. And I noticed how they were ravishing their food and just kind of gobbling it down, I just felt the weird vibe from them. And they started looking around, and I said, these boys are ready to cut out. And sure enough, when they thought the coast was clear, they got up and started to dash. And I'm, in respect of Sylvia's and the fact that she's a hardworking sister, I thought that was so wrong, so I went after them. And Sylvia stopped me at the door and said, those are just two of our junkie babies, and I'm glad they got something to eat. And I was blown away with the consideration and the compassion that she showed was really something that I had never seen before, not like that. So I was blown away. And I asked, I said, I hope you got a pad. And I said, I got a pen with me, but if you got, I need to write this. So I wrote this poem. It's called Two Little Boys. It's one of the hot pieces on the album. They put a pit between me and Kane to the point where we couldn't work together anymore. I was getting stronger as a poet, and this was messing with his ego to the max. Before you did any poem in the group, you had to rehearse the poem, you had to share the poem with the fellas, and of course, our conga player had to find a rhythm. Now, it was an understood thing that if you got on that stage to offer a poem to be put into the repertoire, if Elijah, our conga player, if Elijah did not start playing his congas while you were doing your poem, you might as well throw the poem in the garbage. And Elijah wasn't hip to figurative language, metaphors, and similes, and all that stuff. His thing was about feelings. And if it didn't feel honest, it didn't feel right, he couldn't play behind it. The thing that impressed me so much with this poem I had done, because it came from my gut and I felt it, Elijah couldn't get the conga out of the duffel bag quickly enough. All he could do was get the head of the duffel bag free, so that I got that off the top of the conga, and then he started playing without taking the conga out of the duffel bag. He was, and as I would say, have you seen the skinny little boy chasing the white ghost tonight? He said, boo bop, face puffed up, tractors on, boo bop, boo. The way he played the congas, if you listen to that very first album, that's the only poem where we're having a direct conversation. I would say something, and then he would say something. He was echoing every single word almost with a sound, with a beat that I was saying. It was phenomenal. So he felt it right away. And I knew I had hit something that was really special. Kane didn't bother to, he heard it, but he didn't want to hear it. And so we never really hooked up any background. But the poem was just gnawing at my soul. And we had a gig, I think about 2 days later, at IS 201, a school, 127th and Madison Avenue. And the place was packed. And I just felt that this is a perfect time to do the poem. And regardless, it wasn't on the program, but I just said later with that. And I started to do the poem. I went on and shared the poem. And because I committed it to memory, because you never read a poem from a page. But I remember before I started, I said I was going to do the poem. And I looked back at Kane, and I think Felipe was there. Yeah, Felipe was there. Kane took about 4 giant steps backwards, as if to say, I'm not in this. And it really broke my heart when I saw what he had done. But he was just excusing himself. Matter of fact, to be perfectly honest, we've never read poetry since then. That was the last time we ever stood on a stage, other than when Greg Reed brought us back together in 1990. But for that first phase, in '68, that was the last time Kane and I read before the group broke up. And it was a very interesting situation, but that poem was one of the classics. And to this day, it brings back a lot of memories because of the experience of how it came to be. As I said, it was a pivotal poem in my personal growth, and also in the relationship I had with Garland Kane. So it was one of those poems. Sometimes you can look at a poem to mark a particular era. So another era was beginning from that start.
So what have you learned from doing poetry with the last poets for 53 years that you really own today?
The traveling has been phenomenal. We've been places that I know I probably would not be able to afford to go otherwise. I've met angels every place I've been. There are angels on this planet who are willing to help you and share with you whatever they've got. I have been blessed to have met some beautiful people in almost every single place, from Brazil to South Africa, all over Europe. I mean, it's really been a joy to just touch humanity, just to be a part of that. I mean, there really is only one race on the planet, and it is the human race. And when folks get that together and stop dividing themselves up because of their personal insecurities, this could be a beautiful place to be. But man and his short-minded, midget brain, petty thinking people cause problems, and consequently many of us suffer because of other folks' issues.
Yes.
Traveling and being a last poet and discovering that poetry is an inner language that every single human being has, whether they write poetry or not. But there's something inside of them that's speaking, and the poet seems to be the one to capture that. And because of that, they'll say things to me that they won't say to other people. They'll divulge themselves. They'll make confessions like I'm the Pope or something. There is a lot of reverence when you deal with your people, and they believe that you truly are a poet, and they can talk to you. They feel comfortable around you. So I've discovered that being a poet is like being a psychologist. It's like being a priest. It's like being a doctor of sorts. Because if you really are a true poet, you're going to take time to deal with your people, and you're going to show that compassion and love, because that's what everybody wants. That not just a particular group of people. Everybody on the planet wants to be loved, appreciated, and respected. That's no question. And you discover that when you go through the world dealing with poetry.
Something I want to touch on is the Harlem Renaissance, right? We had the Harlem Renaissance in the early 1900s, and it brought forth so many amazing writers and creative people of color, especially Black people. You and the last poets became part of the second Harlem Renaissance, and you're still doing a lot of work in Harlem and the globe generally. You guys have ushered in a lot of rap artists. They sample you. They got their grit from you because you paved the way for them to be able to tell their story in an authentic way. What does that feel like for you?
You know, I really feel very honored. I've done conferences with Africa Bambaataa and Kool Herc. And those are the two guys that I give credit as being the architects of hip hop. Because Kool Herc told me once at a hip hop conference that we were both attending, that we both were actually on, he said the only thing that those guys had to listen to at that time was the last poets. No one had ever heard anyone say things we were saying in the rawness that we said it, that could actually reach the people on the street. So they were listening and they were learning our stuff just because they felt it was written for them particularly. And they were right. We weren't trying to write for the upper echelons. We were trying to write something that was going to touch the basic person on the street. And we did that. And it seemed to be captivating enough to try to want to emulate it on some levels. I remember one time when I first moved here in this apartment, and I live above Morningside Park, and you can hear everything that happens in the valley. But if they're in the park playing drums or doing something, I can almost hear what they're singing. I can, or the sound just seems to rise. And one evening I was here in the house, and I heard something, and it sounded like I could hear one of my poems, New York, New York. I thought I was listening to that, and so I told Aisha, my wife at the time, I said, let me go down to the park. I think I hear something for me. So I did. I went down to the park, and sure enough, there were some kids standing around. There was a group of kids, and and this one kid was doing New York, New York. I mean, he was really doing it like it was his poem. I could not tell them that I was a writer, that I was a person that they were imitating, that they were listening to. I was born. I think I had a little tear in my eye because I was surprised at how it had just gravitated to them. He was doing this like this was his poem, and I'm like, whoa! It blew me away. I had never felt anything like that. So I was happy to know that we had actually touched. We had done something that was hitting on the pulse of the people, and that is amazing because that was our goal. You know, before the last poets, poetry was in another bag. It was quiet. It was exclusive. It was like tea rooms. You know, you have a little tea, you have some crumpets, and you whisper to each other. And we made poetry rowdy. We gave it a rowdy thing. We made it a war cry. We put brass knuckles on the words and punch you in the face. I mean, it was a whole nother attitude that we brought. But that attitude is prevalent amongst our young people because they want to be bold, they want to be brazen, they want to be in your face. Now they've got a whole script to do that, and they want to call it rap. And I always give credit primarily to Jalal. Jalal was the one brother on the first album. His name was Alapia, but he was a brother that Kane hated because he called him. He said, "Get that nursery rhyming bitch away from me." He didn't like him because all of his poetry rhymed. But Jalal's rhymes made sense. He didn't rhyme just for the sake of rhyming. He didn't say cat because he said hat. If he said cat and hat, trust me, there was a relationship. He had sensible rhymes. I liked his work. His work was bona fide. And I always give him credit for being the biggest influence to hip hop because all the hip hop artists say they rhyme their words. Jalal was a master rhymer. There was no doubt about it. But it was our style. You didn't go on stage with a book. You went on stage and you just did your poem. And you had to incorporate it within you. You couldn't read it from a book. You couldn't read it from a page. And that's all. And rap, hip hop, they took a lot of slices from our way of doing things in order to just establish what they did. And people say, well, you guys are the progenitors of hip hop. I say we were the progenitors of the new wave of poetry, period. That goes way beyond hip hop. Hip hop is just one branch of that tree. Because every single country that I've been to in the last 30 years, they have an open mic, a poetry slam or something. But poetry is a major aspect of living among young folks throughout the entire world.
What have you learned from collaborating with the poets?
I guess one of the most popular was when we collaborated with Common and did a piece called The Corner. And it received the Grammy nomination. That was great. I learned that many of them do look to us as folks who they would like to get support from, approval from, and appreciation. I've done something with Nas. With Nas wanted to do an album. He had called me up. I answered the phone like I always do. I said, Alapia. And then I said, how can I help you? He said, this is Nas. And I said, Nas is the rapper? Because I had no idea he had my number. And he said, yeah. I said, oh, I know you got my number. Because I'm very close to his father, Oladar. His father's a cornet player, and we're very good friends. And so I said, well, what can I do for you? He says, well, Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, they're trying to stop me from doing my album. I want to do this album called On Niggas. And my father said, you're a nigga expert, and I need to talk to you. I said, well, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a nigga expert. But, you know, when you check out our work, yeah, we talked about niggas because we recognize niggas were that negative element that was stopping us from having the unity and for us having the organized body that we were hoping that we could have in order to get this foot up our necks. And we said there's one element in our community called niggas that is stopping everything from going right. And a lot of folks didn't hear the part about niggas that we were talking about. They just heard the word nigga. So Nas wanted to do this poem, do this album, and he wanted to call it nigga. And he had gotten a lot of backlash from some people. So he called me. I said, well, what do you need me to do? He said, I need you to come down to the studio and drop some science on niggas. So I said, sure. So I went down there, and because they had in the paper something about they were having a funeral for the word nigga, and they had some brothers down south with a shovel, buried. You can't, listen, black folks, we are uncanny. We have taken that word and made it wonderful just because we've changed the sound. Black people are the only people on the planet who can take a word like bad and make it great. I mean, we could take horse crap and turn it into meatloaf. We have that ability to change stuff that would be considered waste into something that you would want to treasure. That's one of the gifts that we have. We've done that with language. We've done that with things people have thrown away. We have artists who've taken things that have been thrown away and turned them into fantastic art projects. We have an uncanny ability to recreate life and give life more meaning and message than it had ever had before. So this is something that I see as a special gift. But when you have that kind of a gift, there's a responsibility that comes with that. And many times we just shuck the responsibility and play with the gift like it's a brand new toy. But we don't see how we can navigate through the madness with the gifts that we have. Many times we get caught up with these gifts to the point where we can't find our way out of the circle of just being creative, but not recognizing how it could take us out of the madness that we're in. But the fact is that I went down to the studio and I spoke about, I said, well, niggas are like roaches. They're never gonna go away. And I made it clear. And that's true. The way we say niggas, if somebody says, get that nigga out of here, you know, the attitude that you put behind that expression, nigga, you know that you're talking about somebody you don't want around. By the same token, you say, man, I love that nigga. And you know, when you say that, you're not saying anything that's disparaging remark. This is somebody that's close to you that you want to hang out with. But it's the tone that we add to the word that gives the word much more clarity and meaning. It's not always the word itself. The tone, the sound that we put behind the word takes precedent over the word itself. Because we can say things in a sweet way that might not be sweet at all.
What made you decide to go to Colombia to get your master's?
When I came back to New York City, I just got out of prison and I was here in New York and I started working at a halfway house at first. A few people knew I was out and I was trying to readjust. And a young lady, a friend of mine named Sadia, she said, you ought to come over to Colombia because I think they would love to have you over on staff. There was a program at Colombia called the Community Education Exchange Program. And it was a program for folks coming from other countries to get their degrees in English because they may be architects or lawyers or whatever they were in their country, but they had to learn English and pass certain tests here in order to practice their craft. So we had a whole program dedicated to them. And then they had kids that needed to get their GEDs. So we were doing GEDs and we were teaching folks ESL. And for some reason, because I'm a poet and because my mother taught me how to speak well, people assumed I was an English person. So I was actually given just handed a job as an adjunct teaching English. I never taught English in my life. I didn't know anything at all about teaching English. I learned about sentence diagramming. I didn't know nothing about no daggone diagramming sentences, adverbial phrases and adjective clauses and all this stuff. I think I took about a week or 2 weeks and I crammed and I would learn everything I could learn. And every time I would learn something, I would share with my students. So I'm learning and teaching at the same time. And the thing about it, when you're teaching folks from other countries and you're really helping them and they really feel like you're doing a good job, oh my God, they bring you cakes, they bring you pies, they'll knit you a sweater or a scarf. I had more gifts because I was truly reaching them and trying my best. They don't realize the painstaking ordeal I was going through. But I mean, my teaching thing, above everything else that I do, that is truly my passion. I don't want to get in front of somebody and talk about a bunch of stuff that they can't use. I want to be helpful. I want to be a real plus in your life, not a negative.
Your teaching started at Columbia?
I always have been teaching workshops. I did workshops when we first started Last Poets. I would do a poetry workshop, and it was cool. Remember Ann Carpenter had me come to the Harlem Prep. Harlem Prep was a school for kids that had dropped out of high school, didn't get their degrees. And Ann Carpenter happened to have been my high school teacher, and she knew I was the last poet. We had just started, and she thought because of my age, I was the age of most of the kids in the school. She says, you would be perfect to come, and they would listen to you because, you know, you got something to say, plus you're popular now. And I went to I started teaching there, and it was, the only problem was Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben was teaching right next door to me, so it was very difficult to teach because he has a big mouth, a big voice, and it was open classrooms. So that was not cool at all. So I just told my students to listen, he's going to say something interesting, write a poem about it, we'll talk about it next week. Because it was almost impossible to teach with Dr. Ben next door. But the teaching thing really took hold when I came here to Colombia because that was a full-time gig. And plus, that's how I got this apartment because I was living in Chelsea, and one of the brothers that was working with me said, why are you going downtown to live, brother? You could live right here near campus. I said, how is that? He said, it's Columbia owns space. They own buildings. They own a lot of stuff. So I went over to the housing department, and it was a brother from Fisk University who was in charge of housing. And we got along fine, and I got a nice apartment. I got to knock a wall down, so I have a bigger room than what was anticipated, because where the wall was separating my living room from my dining room, and I didn't need that. So I just got one big room. I was anticipating that I would have some house parties, which I gave the biggest house party in New York City on New Year's Eve. I'd have 400 people come through my house. I mean, I wouldn't be going to Abiodun's house on New Year's Eve, but the whole lot of people came here, and I would be prepared. I'd make barbecue and potato salad and collard greens, and I'd have food for them, and I'd have some beer for them to drink and wine and all that. And folks would have good, and I hired DJs. And from 11 o'clock until dawn, we would party. It would be outrageous.
Sundays at your house is also a big party. How did that start?
I play basketball with a bunch of young men every Sunday. Columbia, because I'm a member of the Columbia family, so to speak, I have my ID card. Now, when you have an ID, they say you're allowed to bring 2 guests with you when you come. So I had the privilege of bringing 2 people. I would never bring 2 people to the gym. I'd bring 15. I'd have a bunch of guys. So we would all meet at my house on Sunday morning about 9 o'clock, and we walk over to the gym, and we play ball, and we dominate. We had a great time. One particular Sunday, I got a crew, we're at the gym, we get ready to play, and this kid says to me, yo, man, I know who you are, and I got this poem. I said, well, brother, I'm happy you know who I am, but I know you got a poem you want me to hear. I said, well, right now we're getting ready to play some poetry, baby. I got no time to be hearing some poetry. He was really sincere, and I knew that, but I was anxious to get it on, because that was my exercise. Plus, I love basketball. I mean, even though I don't play now, I mean, I loved it. I would breathe basketball. I play anytime. So this kid, he played. I think he was on my team, too. And we had a wonderful day. The day was great. We got a good sweat. My team won a lot of games, and so we're packing up, getting ready to come home. So I told the kid, I said, yo, I'll hear that poem now. You know, the game's over, you know, I got time. So the kid pulled the poem out of his pocket, but there was no more poem on the page. His sweat had caused the ink to just drain over. There was just ink on the page. And the kid looked like he was ready to die. And I felt so bad because I kept telling myself, if I hadn't been so selfish about playing basketball and had listened to his poem when he was offering it, I wouldn't have this problem. But now he's just about dead because the poem that he had to share with me doesn't exist. And so I just put my arms around and said, brother, I'm going to take you to my house, and I'm going to let you sit in my chair. It's a magical chair. And then you're going to sit at my desk, and I got some paper and pen, and since you wrote that poem, you're going to rewrite it, and you're going to get it. I know you can do that. So when he came over, I brought him over here with my kids. He sat down, he got some of it. I cooked some food. I made sure I fed him. He had some to drink. I think he said he remembered at least like 85 to 90% of the poem. I can't remember what the poem was, but It was something that he cherished, that he loved, and he shared it with me. That was the first time. Every Sunday after that, after basketball, there would be some people. Some of the guys I even played with happened to be poets. I didn't know they were poets. And so that just opened up the door. And then the word got around. It was never advertised. It was just by word of mouth. And so then it became a regular routine where I would get up, I would cook, I would do everything I could to, because see, if you got people, and this is how I was raised. If you came to visit me when I was a child, my mother always had food for you. There was always something to eat. You were not going to come visit me and not eat something. You know, other people might have something for you to drink. We had food always. So I felt like obligated. And croquettes, salmon croquettes was something I always liked. And I had my own twist. I wanted to add my own thing to it. So I did. And that became a staple. And it's so interesting that when we travel to Europe, I have people come to me from Germany and say, if I come to New York, can I come to your house and eat some salmon croquettes? so I just said, yeah, if you get to my house, sure. That's been a beautiful thing because the whole open house thing kind of evolved.
How many years have you had the Sunday open house?
It's been at least 35 years.
Wow.
Maybe 40. It's been a long time. I don't count the days. I guess I should have chronicled it, but I haven't. I just do it. And the thing about it, when the pandemic came, I was ready. You know, I said, well, that's the end of the open house. So I didn't feel too bad because I have to get up and make no salmon croquettes. But the fact is that my kids decided that we could do it online. So we've been having open house online every other Sunday. And I've got a whole nother online family that I can look forward to seeing every other Sunday. And some of these poets are just vicious. I mean, they're excellent artists. So I'm very pleased. I guess I started something that cannot be stopped. It just seems like it's an ongoing thing. And I'm proud of it because I have had a chance to help bring in some fabulous poets.
Let's talk about what happens at the Sunday open house. Other than the salmon croquettes, what's the creative process that happens? Because it's about a creative process.
All right, we get online and folks just have a little chat, talk to each other. If you see somebody that you know, it's like, hey, how you doing? What's happening? What's happening this week? Because we got people calling from Nigeria, California, I mean, all over the world. Brazil, South Africa, Britain. I mean, it is amazing how many people have, because now these folks couldn't be in my house on Sunday anyway. So we're talking about open houses, an international open house now. So it's gotten bigger because of the machine. And so we'll hear their poem, and then I will give them some immediate feedback, and I'll ask the people online, you know, to also give the people, what did you hear? What did she say that impressed you the most? We want to hear folks talk about your work so you can improve it or you can appreciate it, something or another. And so it's a learning thing. And I will tell people, like, I mean, maybe a couple of times somebody's done something and I say, okay, you were good up until you threw that brick in my face. And they want to know what a brick is. And I'll tell people, a brick is a word that's not poetic, you know, and when you're dealing with poetry, you can't cheat by using your vocabulary. Having a big time vocabulary does not make you a great poet. I mean, I had this one brother said that he met this girl at a party and she was fine, she was sweet, and she had all the she had everything that just made him feel good inside. And then they got together and went over to her house and had a euphoric experience. I said, brother, why did you hit me in the head with a brick? He said, what are you saying? I said, a euphoric experience? And that was in your poem? I said, you killed your poem. Give me the euphoric experience. Don't tell me about it with some big elephant word. But some people will try to cheat like that. That's not it. That's not poetry. Actually gives you the inside of the story. It gives you the inside of the word. Poetry is not meant to be superficial. You got to be real when you're writing poetry. And I have a simple formula that I share with everybody. But just to give you kind of like an outline.
What's the formula? Give us the formula.
The open house starts out with a pledge. And the pledge is very important because the pledge kind of sets the tone for what I would like us to think, how I want us to think, and how I want us to see ourselves. Just because within the pledge, you know, just like before any major event in this country, there's always a pledge or a singing of the national anthem. Well, that's what my pledge does. And it's a situation where it's a call and response thing. and says, I want to be what I can be, to be proud, healthy, and free. I want to say what I know to help my brothers and sisters grow. I want to feel good about me and blame no one for my misery, because I'll be strong. Turn it around. I want to go up. I'm not going down. I want to do what I can do to make all my dreams come true. Remember my past, the good and bad, how I made it art, even when it was sad. I want to share whatever my gift. And when you're feeling low, I'll give you a lift. I want to live without fear and know that I'm blessed for being here. And know that you're blessed for being here. And know that we're blessed for being here. And know that we're blessed. And that's how we open up everything. And we open it up, picking people to share their work.
Does everybody have to sign up, or you just?
No, nobody signs. You just have to know the link to get on, so you can be on. There's no requirement. And my niece, who is really basically the guardian of this entire thing, she'll do a little commercial, say she'll offer my PayPal address to those people that want to donate to the cause, and that's cool.
And what is your PayPal address? So those people that are listening right now, they can donate to the cause now.
It's the same as my email, poetabiodun@yahoo.com. If they can't spell my name, that's going to be a problem. But that's all right. I mean, poetabiodun@yahoo.com. I like to offer little nuggets of information that can help people develop their skills better. And I have some simple things that really work. And I know they work because I've seen it happen. Matter of fact, just recently, I did a workshop in Hartford, Connecticut. A kid asked me a question, Lydia, that I've never been asked for all the workshops I've done and all the places I've done them. I've never been asked a question, which is a very simple question. I think he's 9 or 10. The kid says to me, what is poetry? Oh, my God. I mean, a question like that you would think would be academic. That would be asked before. No one has ever asked that question to me. What is poetry? And I didn't even think before I opened my mouth. It's like my mouth said it before I could think about it. I said, poetry is the flavor of life. And I will never change from that, because that's exactly what it is. I said, I'm looking at your sneakers and the pants that you're wearing, and they seem to match. Like you did that deliberately. You said, yeah. I said, you got other sneakers that match other pants that you got, right? He said, yeah. I said, that's poetry, baby. And his mama was sitting that right beside him, and she's all dressed up looking like she's looking for Mr. Goodbar. And so she's got her earrings and her false eyelashes, which I had to crack on because they look like Japanese fans. I said, your mother, she's all poetic. Look at the way she's dressed. And she started smiling and grinning. So I said, let me tell you something. Poetry, when you're writing poetry, you got 5 senses. I said, what are your 5 senses? So I took him through that trip. I said, you got sense of sight, taste, touch, smell, hearing, sound, all that stuff. So we went through that. I said, when you're writing a poem, you've got to relate to at least one of my senses. If you don't relate to any of my senses, if everything requires me to get a dictionary to figure out what you're saying, that's not poetry. I should be able to see what you're saying, hear what you're saying, feel what you're saying, or smell what you're saying, or taste what you're saying. Somehow, I said, a word like integrity can have a taste. If you say that integrity tastes sweet, it tastes like something that you want to really eat. I mean, I can get down. I may not even know what the word is, but I know it's a good thing to have because of the way you described it poetically. So I mentioned this to this kid, and my first assignment, usually for newcomers, is I have them write what I call an elemental poem. I ask the kid, I say, well, what's your sign? Kids say, I'm Sagittarius. I said, well, when you write on your paper, I'm fire. From a Cancer, I say, write on your paper, I'm water. If you're air sign, I say, right, I'm air. If you're earth, you're right, I'm earth. I said, now write a poem about yourself being that element, but you can't be a person. Be fire, be air, be water, be earth, and tell me about what you do and how people treat you. And I always have to crack with my fire kids because my fire kids, the first thing that comes to their mind, well, I'm fire, I'll burn your ass up. I said, see? I said, you're watching too much television, you want to destroy everything. But this kid, I gave him the little breakdown, my little nuggets of how to write poetry, and he was a Cancer. So I said, well, you're water. I said, so tell me about yourself being being water, or what's in the water. Anyway, this kid said, I'm a shark in the water, smelling the sea salt in the air, feeling the fins of the other sharks as they rub up against me. Oh my God. I mean, the poem it was outrageous. He got into this poem. I was so proud of him. And then I had some interns there and they got into it. This one intern said she had written poetry since she was in high school. She was a sophomore in college. And she wrote a poem that she was so proud of. She passed it around to everybody that was there for them to read it. So it's a joy when you can get people to see what you're saying and then they can produce it on the spot. I have no greater satisfaction for me. And you can take what I'm saying, I can communicate to you well enough for you to incorporate what I'm saying and actually execute right on the spot. Please, there's no paycheck anybody can give me that can match that. That's what I've been doing, and I hope I'm able to do that for all of my life.